Okay, you're good.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's work session. I'd like to call the work session to order. We are televising tonight because of the importance of the issue that we're talking about tonight. And tonight, this meeting's all about BESS. There is no public forum tonight, so I would ask the audience, please, if you want to have a conversation, step out into the hall. The council's got a lot of information to get through tonight, and we just need to stick to the business of our business meeting. With that being said, I do have a presentation I'm going to share with the council tonight. And before I do that, I have an opening statement, and I'll go over that now. And council, I wanted to take some time to talk about BESS this evening. And when I ran for mayor unsuccessfully in 2017 and then came back to be successful in 2019, I had 3 goals for my time in office. None of those had to do with the way this body has operated or the decisions it made during my tenure as a councilman. I've always thought this board, even though the members have changed, the focus has remained the same, and that is what's best for Halstead overall. This body has done the best we can with the budget we have had to work with. My 3 goals as mayor were as follows, and the first one was to get some progress going on with absentee property owners on property that continues to progress into distress. I think you guys are all familiar with those projects. Continue to promote additional housing and residential development because we need it. I've got some other ideas for that we've discussed briefly, but nothing's come to fruition on those. And utilize our industrial park for what it was designed for, industrial development, and not just additional crop ground for local farmers. We have all had conversations, received emails from constituents wanting to see improvements to our parks and other quality of life items in this community. Knowing full well with the priorities we have regarding much needed infrastructure improvements, there would be very little budget left over to do any major projects in that area. We have a very unique opportunity with a potential BESS project in Halstead, and I want to take a deeper dive into looking at that potential. I believe that this is a generational economic development opportunity, and more than likely we will never see anything of this magnitude ever again. So with that, Ethan, if you can start my presentation. So obviously we all know why we're here. We know that, there we go. Ethan moved me right along. Primary risk of a BESS has always been fire. It'll always be fire. It always has been fire. Go ahead to the next slide. How do we mitigate it? We've talked about regulations established by the authority having jurisdiction, which is the Halstead Planning and Zoning Board. Adoption of regulations like NFPA 855 and UL 9540, and standards for manufacturers like New York City's TM2 requirement. Go ahead and go to the next slide. What is UL 9540? This term comes up all the time. It's actually included under the 855 NFPA, but it basically specifically covers the inverters and the battery containers and things like that. They're all within a BESS system where NFPA 855 covers the entire system. Go on to the next one, Ethan. The TM2 regulations that New York City come out with, when I first found this, I thought it was pretty interesting. If you read through all the requirements of the TM2, basically this lines up with what our special use permit process would ask for. So it's not a lot different, but it's something to compare it to. Go on to the next one, Ethan. Let's talk about some incidents. So this first one, you've heard this come up many times. This is Surprise, Arizona. If you can look, the door off of that building is wadded up, stuck in the fence. If you look at that picture close, you can see the whole building's buckled. The air conditioners obviously blew their covers off during that event. There were some firefighters injured. And, you know, the study afterwards would point to how this happened. And you can go to the next slide, Ethan. So the biggest problem was this BESS was designed as a room with batteries installed. It allowed you to walk in. It allowed for a significant amount of airspace when in the battery containment area. That large airspace filled with combustible gases, and that eventually led to an explosion. Modern BESS is designed as a containerized unit with very limited airspace to avoid this. Also, modern BESS has the deflagration panels built into it. It works like a check valve, and if the container starts to pressure, it's going to open and allow that pressure to get out, thus taking the explosive environment away from the container. So go on to the next slide. Case study, the elephant in the industry. We've all looked at Moss Landing pretty hard. My laser pointer don't work on the TV, so this is phase 1 up here. This is phase 2 down here. This is phase 3. This BESS up here belongs to a different company, and it's the Elkhorn Creek BESS. I know that has Tesla Megapack units on it. At one time, it suffered one fire on one container because somebody left a rain shield off the container when they were doing the install. So for the purpose of this first point, I want to let you know this long building here was an old turbine enclosure. So they had steam electric turbines in there with, you know, overhead sprinkler lines and everything that you would see associated with steam turbines. And all the ancillary equipments like your inverters, transformers, and things like that are mounted on the outside of the building. Phase 2 has the same style of construction. So I think it's important to point that out. Let's go to the next slide, Ethan. There's the inside of that turbine hall. So you can see these are just racks and racks and stacks of batteries lined up. And they put 2 stacks together with maybe 5 foot between them. Those are raw batteries sitting there with their plastic case components around them. There is no mechanical, physical protection around that battery whatsoever. And 2 of the original incidents that happened at phase 1 was, one of them for sure was a bearing that went bad in an HVAC system. The system sensed smoke and it engaged the water sprinklers, which in turn flooded water down on those batteries because there's no protection around them whatsoever. And a couple of cells went into thermal runaway and created a problem. That happened at least twice in that facility. I contend that if they ever get to a root cause of the biggest fire, you'll probably find it was the same thing that created that problem. And you can go to the next slide, Ethan.
Hey, sorry, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
On that? Just in regards to, I saw that each of those phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 were different. I'm guessing the M and the W is megawatt, is that?
Yes.
And so, just for like that last picture, like how many megawatts am I looking at?
Phase 1 was a 300 megawatt design. Right.
Okay.
And that doesn't show, look how long that turbine hall is up there on phase 1. That's here. So I'm not sure how much of that whole thing is lined up with batteries, but there's a bunch.
Yeah, okay.
And I contend that was a bad idea from Jumpstart, in my opinion. Phase 2 is designed a lot the same way. And if you look over there at phase 3, well, now phase 3 is a containerized type battery. It's installed outdoors. It's got some spacing that would be indicative of NFPA 855. I don't know whose containers those are. I haven't been able to find that out. We can go to the next slide, Ethan.
Thank you.
Or go on. So these were reports from those fires that talked about the HVAC system tripping because of smoke in a duct or something that didn't originate with the batteries. But in turn, it put water down on the batteries and started the problem. Like I said, bad design from Jump Street. Let's go one more, Ethan. So that's an overview, again, of how the plant was laid out, a little closer look. And we can go to the next slide. And that's kind of a better view of phase 3 that you don't hear anything about because, again, I think it's closer to an NFPA 855 installation. Don't know whose batteries they are, but as close as I could zoom in, I got a feeling they could be Teslas, but I don't know. It could be Fluence. There's a lot of manufacturers whose units look about the same. Let's go to the next slide. So the reports from what can only be stated as the largest BESS fire in the U.S. On January 25th, the EPA come out and they said, hey, you know, we monitored for hydrogen fluoride and particulate matter and showed no risk to public throughout the entire incident. And the smoke had greatly diminished by that point. So, I mean, this is data from the EPA. It's not Vistra Energy saying this is what we've seen. Next slide, Ethan. There was a lot of concern early on about how this would affect the organic farm ground around Moss Landing. This is from the California Certified Organic Farmers. they're basically saying that to date, and this was March 21st, 2025, where they put this statement out, they're saying they have seen no contamination from this incident. And I like this slide from the California Certified Organic Farmers because they probably have more skin in the game than anybody else, and they have no reason not to be truthful with their findings. So again, Moss Landing, bad design to start with, biggest fire I think this country will ever see associated with BESS, and quite frankly, I think they had enough warning signs ahead of time. They should have put some safeguards in place to avoid it. Next slide. Another one that I like to look at, this is Escondido, California. This plant went online in 2017. So no NFPA 855 or UL 9540 or actually any other regulations at the local zoning ordinances. They didn't have any regulations in place. They evidently trusted the person that was putting this in, wanted to see the economic development. The city of Escondido has several other BESSes located within their city proper. You can see you got the two big square units on top of the containers. Those are obviously HVAC units for the heating and cooling. And then the round thing off to the end, well, that's going to be a vent fan so that if those containers start to pressurize with gases, those gases can be expelled and therefore reducing the explosive atmosphere. But they still had a fire, and you can go to the next slide. And it's ugly. I mean, that's ugly. It's smoky. You can see flames coming out of it. But at the end of the day, go to the next slide, Ethan. Is the realistic incident that I talk about. It's limited to one containerized BESS unit out of the 24. This is a 30 megawatt, 120 megawatt hour site. It sit there and smoldered in that container and flamed for 13 hours. They did evacuate some people around the area out of an extreme abundance of caution. And it's been reported that the fire was by all accounts well managed by Escondido Fire and SDG&E. We can go to the next slide, Ethan. Again, their reports, there's your air quality reports from the San Diego County hazmat team saying that only normal products of combustion of a structure fire were detected and below exposure thresholds for the general public. And Haley and Aldrich were doing oxygen readings in the area, and the oxygen did not deviate from normal atmosphere. Those particular BESS units are a Siemens-based unit. They call them, I don't think that's Fluence. Who is Siemens now, Bart? Is that Fluence or is it somebody else's? So anyway, yeah, it does say Fluence. So it is Fluence. They're a pretty big player in the market. Fluence, SunGrow, and Tesla were probably the first three manufacturers to make it on New York City's TM2 requirements. And basically that TM2 requirement for New York City says that if you meet that requirement, you can be installed right downtown Manhattan. And I don't think you're going to find a population density more dense than that. So let's move on to the next one, Ethan. We talked about battery chemistry. I'm not going to go into detail on that. You guys have all heard this, but at the end of the day, LFP is way safer technology than NMC. All the incidents that I showed you above were NMC, except I'm not 100% sure about the Surprise, Arizona, but I'm guessing it was NMC at the time that it happened. So we'll go on to the next slide. How many utility scale 1 megawatt and greater are operating in the U.S.? As of March 2025, this says there's 677 utility scale BESS projects in the U.S. I contend there's more than that. The reporting on this data is kind of weak. It's hard to find data. It's hard to find current data on it. This says there was 26,000 megawatts in 2024. There were 117 battery storage projects built in the U.S., and almost half of these units are sited over aquifers. So let's go to the next page. There's all your maps of your United States aquifer. So if you think about the concentration of these units that we see in California, Texas, and along the eastern seaboard, it's pretty hard to put a BESS somewhere where it's not going to be over an aquifer. So let's move to the next slide. Fire Risk Alliance. which actually we had a representative here early on for one of the open houses that Concurrent did. They studied 35 BESS fires around the country, particularly looking at damage to aquifers. And generally, the chemicals are poorly water soluble, so they're going to tend to float on the top. Your stormwater mitigation systems typically contain the runoff. In all the incidents that they investigated, there's no evidence to suggest that this caused any hazardous contamination of groundwaters or the aquifers. And part of that special use permit process, we would design mitigation strategies into any potential plant to further ensure that we don't risk it. I think from the daily operation of a unit just sitting there running, you would never see exposure to the aquifer from the actual batteries themselves. But if we did have a fire event, there could be some potential with that cooling water used on neighboring structures that we need to monitor it before we just go to disposal with it. So let's move to the next slide, Ethan. Where are these BESS? Well, this is a pretty shallow map. In the teal color, that's just what was put in, and I think that's the second quarter of 24. Yeah. And then the orange dots were planned third quarter of 24. So this doesn't even represent anything that was put in prior to 24. This is just the projects from 24 from second and third quarter. So again, California and Texas, they're leading the charge with probably the most deployed units. Then you can see up along the eastern seaboard, that's been filling in. And I think it's just natural to assume if this is so beneficial to the grid, they're going to start filling in the center of the country with this. And we're seeing large indicators that that is exactly where they're headed. So let's go to the next slide, Ethan. U.S. battery capacity increased by 66% in 2024. And these are the numbers I look at almost every week. The growth is exponential. It's crazy. It's unreal to see this kind of growth with an industry. And just look at the growth from 2020. And I always refer to 2020 as the birth of the modern BESS. This is where you started seeing your containerized battery units and what we know today as modern BESS. And the growth is absolutely taken off in an exponential manner. So next slide, Ethan. Here's just a blurb on growth. And as you can see, I parsed this out. There was 28 battery storage projects that were already commissioned first quarter of 25. 22 of those were standalone, like the proposed project for Halstead. 6 were paired with wind or solar. So, I mean, the growth is crazy. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a nice chart I found, and this is as up to date as I could find, and it looks like it runs through July of 24 was really the last time this chart was updated with the projects that have happened and the green line representing projects that are in the queue to happen next. Let's go to the next slide, Ethan. This is the SPP connection list, and this is parsed out by standalone BESS only. And I looked at this 6 months ago, and as you can see, those top 12 items have been added in the last 6 months. They were all added in March. So I think there's 35 total projects on here now. There was 25 on here. I figured that out. It's a 40% increase in the number of requests for connection. And if you look over in like these columns over here, here's your counties. So you can see where they're at. The Labette County BESS, we'll talk about. That project's right here. Halstead's is highlighted here, and you can see the other counties around the state. And I just kept this Kansas specific so that we knew these are real projects that are in the talks in the state of Kansas. And again, this data is all open and accessible to the public. If you just search SPP connection requests, you'll get access to this great big Excel spreadsheet, and then you can utilize your Excel skills and parse it out like I have. So, I mean, this technology is coming. We see evidence of it across the entire state. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Ethan. BESS failure rate over time. This slide can be a little misleading if you don't understand everything. Again, I contend 2020 is the birth of modern BESS. And then you factor in, if we could factor out the problems at Moss Landing that they created for themselves, this line would be a lot flatter from 2020 to 2024. Most of that data that spikes this chart is because of the incidents at Moss Landing and Surprise, Arizona. The next slide, this spells it out. So again, you see a lot of incidents per deployed gigawatt in 2016, 17, 18, and 19. 2020, modern BESS came into the picture. The incident rating's still not real good, and even in 21, it's still not good. But in 2022, you see the deployed gigawatt start going above the incident rating. 2023, it starts to look real good. And if you look at 2024, and I imagine the reason the E's on there is because they didn't have the complete data for the whole year, but that starts spelling a really nice looking picture for the safety of modern BESS and what we can expect with it. Again, if you want to look at this later, this chart's from the Volta Foundation. They're a nonprofit organization that covers these battery projects around the U.S. And when I found this chart, I thought it was incredibly powerful, showing the safety record of modern BESS. So let's move to the next chart. Now let's talk about some of the projects. We've all heard about the BESS at the Sedgwick County Zoo. If you look at the overhead picture, that's it circled in red. It's right next to lakes, right next to housing development right there in Sedgwick County. You know, they took into consideration EPA effects and everything of this plant before they built it because of the proximity of those lakes and that housing development. And then there's a street view picture of it. It's a 1 megawatt, 4 megawatt hour plant. That plant was brought online May 28, 2022. It's been cycling approximately once a day ever since and has operated trouble-free. Next slide. This is Minneapolis, Kansas, another BESS that we've talked about. Again, if you see the little red dot and the little red circle, this is where they're installing it, kind of by their existing power plant. It's right there on the fringe of their city. There's a street view of it. It's another 1 megawatt, 5.1 megawatt hour plant. It was commissioned 12/23 of 21, has been operating trouble-free ever since. Next. Labette County, Kansas, we talked about that. This is a concept drawing of that plant. It's approved, it's moving through their stages right now. This is a 300 megawatt, 1,200 megawatt hour plant. This plant's huge. This is 4 times as big as what we're looking at here in town. But it's going through the stages and it'll be built. Next one, Ethan. This slide I put on here because this is in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I'll be in Sheboygan, Wisconsin next week for my regular job. I knew they had a BESS project approved. If you see that red X, that's where they're locating this BESS. Again, it's within reasonable proximity to residential neighborhoods. It's also across the street from their coal burning power plant. That coal burning power plant is going to be decommissioned, and they plan on using this BESS to help replace that plant being decommissioned. Next slide, Ethan. So I don't expect you guys to read through this line by line, and council, I can have Ethan share this presentation with you if you'd like to see it. I did speak with their mayor, Ryan Sorensen, earlier this week, or last week, because I knew I was going to be in Sheboygan, and I wanted to go look at this site. They haven't broke ground yet. They utilize their special use permit process to approve the plant, and it moved forward. They had no resistance from the public. I think probably because the public wants to get rid of that coal burning plant. And if you look, can you back up on that picture, Ethan? If you look at where this plant is located, that's right on the shoreline of Lake Michigan. So I'll be out there next week doing a little salmon fishing, I hope, but it's right there on the shoreline of Lake Michigan. And in fact, the resort I'm staying at, if Ethan can't zoom out, but I'm literally, I think, 5 or 6 blocks north of that power plant where I'll be at. But I wanted to bring that one up because I'm going to Sheboygan. I was hoping they were building it so I can go by and take pictures. But let's go to the next one. This one I just found the other day. Ameren, Missouri filed for this application. This was announced July 2nd. A lot of my data comes from the American Clean, I can give you that website, but it's American Clean Power. It's where I find a lot of this stuff. There's a concept drawing. They're locating it next door to a natural gas plant. And if you go to the next picture, Ethan, this one sits over on the border of Missouri and Illinois. It's right along the Mississippi River, and it's right next to that Harlow Island National Wildlife Refuge and Harry S. Truman State Park and river access. Again, if these were detrimental to the environment, they wouldn't locate them next to national parks and rivers and things. So let's go to the next slide, Ethan. I came across this one the other day, and I found this one to be very interesting. This project is currently going on in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's a 3 megawatt, 12 megawatt hour plant. The containers are all set. They've started hooking the wiring up, and they will be commissioning and bringing this plant online very shortly. What makes this plant interesting is the technology that they're utilizing to build this plant. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Ethan. So this is a company called EOS. It's an aqueous liquid battery. And the three big things that got me: non-flammable, non-toxic, and fully recyclable. And it'll last for 6,000 cycles with total degradation leveling out at 70 to 80%. To me, that's a move in the right direction with this technology. It answers a lot of the environmental impact questions of it. And I think we should all have eyes on Lincoln, Nebraska as that project progresses. But I wanted to bring it to your attention. Let's go to the next slide. So let's start talking about the financial impact a little bit. You guys were all aware of House Bill 2083. It did not pass. It would have clarified the taxable status of standalone BESS. It didn't come out of committee. Standalone BESS, we still don't know. It's not 100% clear. We really need the state to step in and put some definition to it. That's always going to come to play. When we start negotiating a developer's agreement down the road, we need to know what's going to be taxed, what's not. Any developer is going to recognize that potentially with no or little financial benefits to Halstead, we wouldn't even consider it. I mean, at the end of the day, why would we consider something that's not going to make us money? The current offer that was on the table to operate in our industrial park, you all know, you've heard this a million times, it's $500,000 per year. And it'd be that for every year after that the project would be exempted from taxes. Now, at this point, we can talk about some of the financial impact, but it's all speculative. Until we have a real project on the table, until we have a developer's agreement in place, we don't know where this could lead. So let's go to the next slide, Ethan.
So basically, this is a starting point, or no?
Well, I mean, the starting point would be to get the project under review under the special use permit process application. A developer.
Financially.
Yeah, and then a developer, once those studies all come in, if it looks favorable to a permitted use, well, then we would start negotiating a contract with them. I mean, it takes a lot of, Ethan can probably tell you how many boxes we got to check to get to that point, but it's a bunch. You guys all see this cut up dollar in part of our budget presentations we do every year, and I asked Ethan to do this because I always liked that. That red section to the right side, that would represent of our total dollars in Halstead at that $500,000 a year payment, what that BESS revenue would look like to the city. And it's a nice piece of that dollar, right? So let's go to the next stage. And you can see our revenues by stream coming into the city of Halstead, with natural gas being the biggest, but you know, natural gas is gonna have the most expenses coming out of it too. Then property tax, then the water sales tax, and water sales and fees, and then our sales tax. And right now, at that $500,000 a year revenue, BESS would come in pretty close to what we collect in sales tax. Bryce, close your ears for a minute. I believe that deal could be negotiated at a higher level, and I believe that we could potentially put a deal on the table with BESS that could put it as the number 3 revenue stream in Halstead, which would take that number closer to 800,000 to $1 million a year. But without having a negotiation with a developer's agreement, you'll never know. It's all speculation. So let's move to the next slide. At our current mill rate, we've talked about this, it would take 290 new homes valued at $200,000 to generate the same revenue. It would take 26 commercial or industrial properties appraised at $1 million to generate the same revenue. Remember when I said this is a generational economic development opportunity? We'll never see anything of the magnitude of this again with the revenue that it can bring to the city. Go to the next slide, Ethan. These are kind of hard for me to see, but what are we looking at? Well, right now, the current value of the city of Halstead is $20 million. Capital investment of this nature, we project it to be around $160 million investment. On new infrastructure investment such as that, the city would basically get credit for 25% of the value would go directly toward the value of the city. So that would be an increase in value to the city of $40 million, or it would effectively triple the value of Halstead. You can see the city's post-BESS project value goes up to 60 million, or 3 times our current value. Where that comes into play is when we start talking about bonded indebtedness allowed by the state. That's always 30% of a city's value. We've always had a governing body policy. We would never exceed 20%. In our current operating environment, that means we carry about $4 million a year comfortably on our books. Post-BESS, under the same formula, we could carry $12 million a year comfortably, which would give us an increase of $8 million in total bonded indebtedness. And again, this council is very conservative. We would never spend up to that level, but these parks, these quality of life improvements that people want to see in town, what could we do if we just threw $1 million at those over a couple of years?
Dennis, what's that do for potential for borrowing money and interest rates?
Ethan, what do you think? I mean,
The market would largely set the rates. I mean,
yeah,
the lower debt ratio you carry, like if you were doing something that's gonna be a rated issue, the city would most likely receive more favorable rates, similar to somebody's own personal finances. If you carry a lower debt load, then that's seen as a sign of economic strength as compared to maxing out. So potentially it could result in lower rates depending on how much of the debt capacity was being
But does
utilized.
enhance our collateral,
Does it, I'm sorry?
enhance the collateral of the city.
You have more essentially to borrow, and you have additional revenue that can be called on to repay that debt. So those would be strengths.
in council, we've been very conservative with our financial decisions, which has garnered us a AA credit rating as the city of Halstead, which generally means when we do bond projects like the Main Street extension and all that, we usually get the cheapest interest rate available. And, we've talked about reserves and things like that we keep in play. And I know this council will still be very, very conservative with money and try to continue on that same path.
Well, in regards, does any of that affect like a homeowner's property tax, or could it possibly, or we can't talk about that yet?
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay, sorry.
So this is just the value, our value as a city and what it means. Let's get to the next slide, Ethan, and then this might answer your question, Shauna.
Thank you.
So hypothetically, because this is all speculative until we have a developer's agreement on the table, let's say we can negotiate a deal for $800,000 a year. Now let's just apply that $300,000 straight to tax relief. What would that do? Well, it would wipe out the 8 mil increase presented by the USD 440 bond, and we could present an additional 5 mil decrease across the board for every taxpayer in Halstead for a citywide tax break of 13 mils. Still leaving 500,000 in the city coffers for projects or potential bond payments that could be considered. And 5 mils might not mean a lot to us on our home insurance. I mean, it's gonna be some, but I contend that 5 mils and that total savings of 13 mils is gonna be very important to our commercial industrial businesses operating in the city. And it would be some real tax relief they could see where it could drive them to further invest in the community and possibly do some upgrades around their facilities. Again, it's speculative until the project's really put together. So and any projects we do in town, it's just gonna add to the value of the community overall. Let's go to the next slide, Ethan. This was just a slide of basically how we could spend that money. And the council would make that decision. But you could offset the mill increase due to the school bond, decrease taxes to benefit the entire community. We've talked about changing our retirement program for fire police. We could do that. More aggressive street replacements. We have 21 unpaved blocks out there that we could potentially put a project together to pave. Quality of life enhancements, maybe a rec center, community center, all things that we've talked about that we as council members know are kind of out of reach right now. This could potentially put those projects within our reach. More infrastructure additions to attract developers for more housing. Our pending debt obligations we got coming up. We got a big wastewater treatment plant to pay for. Half of a street project on North Street, and there's other projects in the pipeline. They're gonna happen with, fortunately, we've done a good job with getting some grants secured, but we still have our share of those grants for those matching funds we gotta cough up. And this one, number 9 was very special to me. Put in a new wastewater lift station so the Southwest residents are not on septic systems. Let's make them feel like they're part of a city over there. I really feel that those particular residences should be on city sewer. They're not right now because of their location, and we could fix that. And overall, this would add to the general financial security and physical soundness of Halstead. So go to the next slide, Ethan. Some other ancillary things that were discussed. The current developer said that they'll basically buy our fire department whatever additional equipment our fire department needed as a result of this being in our community. Air monitors, a drone with thermal imaging. I believe there was a special fire apparatus that they were talking about. They've also had offered to pay us the equivalent of local sales tax on the equipment if that equipment was deemed tax exempt. And I'm not sure what that is, but just with quick math, let's say each battery container is worth $1 million. And I know they're gonna be worth 500,000 and up. And what I'm basing this off of is I seen a 4 megawatt Tesla mega pack and it was priced for $7 million. And I work in the process control industry and I know about how much margin people have in those for projects. And sometimes on projects they really wanna win, you'll see as much as a 50% discount. Well, that'd still put that 4 megawatt battery package at a cost of $3.5 million. And then you divide it in half because our batteries would be 2.5 megawatts. That's still over $2 million. But I don't know, maybe Bryce can tell us exactly what he thinks it'll cost, but they're not real good at telegraphing that. So this is a guess. And then the 31 units would be the transformers, inverters, and that ancillary equipment that's skid mounted that I believe would be at another $100,000 per unit. So pretty significant front end loading on the project. This money would be helped with attorney fees, things with planning and zoning that we've had to have legal reviews on, things like that. So, and I still think my estimate's low there. Go on to the next slide. Some of my final thoughts, we covered the financial benefit to the city, and I can't read this very good. Our fire department was interviewed on 4/1 of 2025. They basically said that there's other things more dangerous than BESS in the community already. Will it contaminate the aquifer? On March 20th, the Harvey County Now interviewed Groundwater District Manager Tim Bays. And he said, they're concerned, but this could safely be mitigated to not worry about the aquifer. And the evidence I'm collecting around the country would suggest that, yeah, this is easily done. Some of the comments coming from the general public, they were worried about ownership of this. And at the 6/23 council meeting, Evergy was here, and they basically telegraphed from the podium that, yeah, they were interested in ownership. In fact, they had alluded to a potential partnership with a developer if this project could be done. So the city's had multiple professionals weigh in on this project, with no information suggesting that this would have a detrimental impact on the community. There are 0 deaths associated with any BESS incident to date in the U.S. So the Arizona incident was probably a more extreme outlier that injured those firefighters when that exploded. In contrast, from what we've heard publicly, the opposition, they haven't brought forth any experts and no credentialed speakers to support their position. There were 71 people present at the last council meeting, and that represented 4% of our population, if they were all Halstead residents, which I say they're not. The roughly 300 people that responded to Jim's Facebook post would represent 14% of the community if they were all residents. I don't think those were all residents. So I'm asking you, my colleagues, elected officials, you swore an oath to serve this entire community. Are we truly representing the entirety of our community by banning this technology and not seeing it through the process that was established by our peers that served before us? So I do have a closing statement for my presentation. And I want to give that now, and then we'll move on our agenda. So the current developer could withdraw at any time now, and frankly, I wouldn't blame them. They have invested, and I got an update tonight, they've invested $1.4 million so far in this project. And they stand to forfeit a large portion of that if they pull out at the moment. Their original application to SPP for the connection study was accompanied by an $800,000 payment. They have another $800,000 payment due in the next few weeks, and an additional $800,000 payment to SPP would be necessary prior to the connection of the project to the grid. And this basically covers the cost of the upgrades to the substation to support the project. If this project could make it through our process and achieve approval, they will be invested in this project to the tune of $2.4 million before a shovel ever hits the ground in the industrial park. What I feel this council needs to do, regardless of the current opportunity, is number one, we need to establish the tiers of BESS and adopt regulations. I feel the base regulations need to cover residential uses. Commercial and industrial grid-connected BESS should be referred to the special use permit process application. And I feel we need to review and update our special use permit process and make sure it's solid. This parcel in question is uniquely suited for this application, and as technology advances, I believe it will be viable for the next 3 to 5 years. A 10-year ban will close the window of opportunity for Halstead. And I'm basing this off of the growth, the connection requests, and the things that I'm seeing out there in the general public. Again, this is a generational economic opportunity that I think we need to take a hard look at. And at the end of the day, I'll tell you, the developer, they've already invested $1.4 million. They would have to invest another 100, well, it'd be 160, it'd be 1.6 million before they got to the chance to build. And with that kind of potential investment in our community, don't they deserve the chance to at least be looked at honestly by our special use permit process? Let the engineers come in and do the studies. I've contended that I will support this council's decision, whatever you make. But can we effectively make a good decision before the date is on the table? And with that, I'll conclude what I wanted to talk about tonight and move on our agenda. And we had Battery Energy Storage System Planning Commission recommended regulations. And did you want to pretense that or talk about that, start that conversation, Ethan?
Yeah. Sorry. All right.
Well, I didn't know this was gonna be, televised, but while you're doing that, can I say something while you're just doing that?
It's your meeting.
I just wanted to say that I have learned a lot through this process. I learned a lot through some of the events that took place on Monday. I've learned a lot since some things that took place on Monday. I guess I have something more formal. I don't know if this is probably not the time to probably say that. I can make a Facebook post or something about that, but I'm human and I've learned though, there's no like rule book that they hand you when you take a city office position. And so I guess I'm asking for grace in some of that aspect and kind of learning through this process to navigate this and do what I feel like is what's best for our community and what's best for all citizens. And I feel like that's all I've really asked when I took this position, is to be trusted that that's what I would be doing, to listen. And so I guess that's all I guess I'll say at this time, but just some of my learning along the way for some grace in regards to that. I do have more to say, but I'll wait for maybe a better time to say that. But so I hear people say that, we can't trust people, we can't, well, that's what we're being, that's what I'm asking of you, I guess, is that you want me to listen, I want to do that, but I want to also listen to all the sides of the story. And I just ask that you also respect that in me, that I'm going to truly be a representative of the people, that you allow that to happen, I guess, for me to truly say that I've done my due diligence, to truly make sure that I'm hearing all sides of that story, and that it's coming from the most accurate, most reliable, most up-to-date information from educational people that are providing those things. And that's all I guess I would be asking back of you. That is all for now. Thank you.
Another thing I'd like to point out that I think is very important to this process, by not allowing the developer the ability to go through the process that's been set up to vet projects like this, we run the risk of putting ourselves in a position where anybody wanting to do any kind of economic development is never going to come to Halstead. These companies that look at economic development, they have site selectors that watch things like our council meetings, they read our minutes, and if they see the controversy surrounding any type of economic development, they're going to consider us unfriendly and they're going to move to a different city. And we have the director of Harvey County EDC sitting in the audience. Beth, if I'm out of line, you can tell me I'm out of line. So, council, does anybody else want to say anything before we move to Ethan? Go ahead, Ethan, it's your show now.
All right, to the point Councilmember Will brought up, I know there's a lot of zoning terms that have been thrown at you. You guys obviously got a plethora of information to review after a 16-month process, so this is very much a 30,000-foot view to just kind of explain some of those things to you all, so hopefully you have a better understanding. This is going to reference the draft regulations. As you all know, my job is to put forth and enforce whatever the majority will of this governing body would be, both as the zoning administrator and as the city manager. So, if at the end of these conversations, the majority wants to move towards banning, then we will execute that as staff. If we're having a different conversation, then we'll execute that. It is your guys' decision, and this is just meant to give some background. So there's the current parcel of the proposed site. It's in the city's I-2 heavy industrial district. This has come straight out of the zoning regulations. I-2 was established for industries which require large amounts of land or use land intensely, generate heavier type traffic, place more demands on public utilities, create some environmental problems, and are generally not compatible with residential or commercial activity. Uses which present special environmental problems or hazardous situations will require a special use permit or a conditional use permit. Again, that's out of your current zoning regulations, language. As far as development challenges of the proposed site, that site has been formally platted and marketed actively since 1999. It was marketed before that as well. You can go back to the city's comprehensive plan in 1990, where the city actually talks about annexing the industrial park land with the sole and purpose of expanding the city's tax base. It's an odd-shaped parcel. You can see originally they divided it into 3 smaller lots. The city combined those into one larger lot to make it more marketable. There is a 100-foot wide KGE easement that divides that parcel north and south. There's also a 50-foot wide diagonal KGE easement across the upper third that runs southeast to northwest. And if you have been out or you saw the picture, there are those high power voltage or high power lines going into the substation. Those present height restrictions on at least part of that parcel. As far as use examples that are called out in our zoning regs, that would be in the city's industrial zoning districts. And the city has 2 industrial zoning districts. We have I-1, which is light industrial, and I-2, which is heavy. I-2, anything that's allowed in I-1 is automatically allowed in I-2, and then I-2 has some additional. But again, just things that could be built now with minimal oversight, doesn't have any special process. They are listed as an allowed use is in that top section. And then we do have some things that are specifically called out as being not allowed, like acid manufacturing or glue or soap manufacturing, tanning. So again, as far as uses, you can allow things, you can not allow things, or you can allow things but require them to go through additional processes like a special use permit. As far as the Plan Commission process and timeline, this basically has every meeting the Planning Commission has had. That first one, I will note, turned into just kind of a de facto public information system or session because we didn't have a quorum at that February 20th meeting. But as you can see, 3 official public hearings were conducted. Public comment was taken at more than half of those meetings. You all referred the regulation and the question of potential use to under the zoning back in January 22nd of 2024. You eventually asked for a final recommendation for the Planning Commission by June 23rd, 2025. And I will note the regulations, the draft that you all received were developed over 16 months. And I feel it's important to point out, and those regulations were informed by comments from Equisped's GMD2, Harvey County Emergency Management, Halstead Fire EMS, Baird Home, Adam Jones Law, Camelot Energy Group, Fire and Risk Alliance, Concurrent, review of regulations from multiple states and other jurisdictions in Kansas that actually had BESS regulations on the books. Also best practices from the American Planning Association, and then public comment that was taken at the majority of the meetings. So an allowed use versus a special use, why would we choose one over the other? An allowed use is only going to be subject to the existing codes or regulations that are on the city books. There's generally no additional conditions that can be required unless you run into something very specific in terms of like it's an industrial lot that happens to border a residential, then sometimes you can require additional screening, if you will. There's also minimal public input or pre-assessment of projects or land uses. If it's an allowed use, again, somebody came in with a bottling plant and wanted to build it in our industrial park, it's pretty much good to go as long as it can meet any applicable codes or regulations we have in terms of building. So special use allows for impact assessments or other studies prior to development. It allows for additional conditions or mitigation actions that can be required of a project, and it allows for public input, case-by-case review on specific projects, and ultimately, even though you go through a process, you still can deny a special use process. And why I say the case-by-case is important when it comes to a bottling plant is bottling plant. With BESS and the way the regulations were drafted as what was submitted to you by the Planning Commission, every BESS, just because one would allow, you can look at those projects completely, with fresh eyes. Just because a city would allow one doesn't mean the second one would be approved and vice versa. They're literally done on a case-by-case. And it was for these factors, I believe the Planning Commission opted to keep utility scale BESS especially under the special use and not entertain it being just an allowed use. So as far as studies, safeguards, or conditions as are in the current draft regulations that were given to you all, concept, visual plan, and layout for the site, detailed project narrative identifying and detailing specifics of the project, including the involved parties, construction companies, permitting and interconnection status, staging and construction routes and schedules and timeframes, all equipment to be installed on site, including manufacturers and models, identification of built-in or additional hazard mitigation capabilities or technologies, details as to how the project is adhering to industry best practices or safety standards. The hazard mitigation capabilities of the project must include hazard detection systems, thermal runaway prevention, fire suppression, electrical component protection, ground fault protection, electrolyte spill or leakage, explosion prevention, cybersecurity, and environmental hazards such as extreme weather, humidity, dust. They have to have a community impact assessment detailing the short and long-term impacts of the proposed project. That impact assessment includes both positive and negative, so it's not just a rose-colored, glass half full type report. It's going to talk about the good, it's going to talk about the bad. Hazard mitigation and risk analysis specific to the site, emergency response operations training and management plan, environmental assessment to EPA standards, stormwater and site-specific runoff detention study and plan, a site-specific hydrology and groundwater impact study, an acoustic study, an initial failure modes and effects analysis, and the applicant must also provide large-scale fire and explosion risk data for the equipment. Other safeguards or conditions in that special use permit as in the current draft regulations included the owner or developer having property and liability insurance as well as environmental risk impairment liability insurance, commissioning plan for the project that's overseen by a third party that includes testing and verification of operations, a decommissioning plan for the project overseen by third party that includes appropriate hazard and dangerous material disposal, decommissioning financial assurances held and guaranteed by third parties, prohibition of long-term storage of used, spent, or damaged batteries, prohibition of repurposed or second life batteries, system and equipment certifications per NFPA, UL, IEC, NEC, IFC. I could roll off about 4 other acronyms to you, but I won't. Procedures, plans, and schedules related to ongoing predictive and preventative maintenance for the equipment that's on site, annual evaluation of the facility for the first 5 years, biennial thereafter, 24/7 monitoring, including built-in redundancy and backup, fencing, lighting, signage, manuals, and information to be stored at site, continued annual emergency operations and response training, augmentation, modifications, retrofits are required to go through another SUP process, so they couldn't take this, if something was permitted as a 3120 system, they can't 2 years from now say, oh, we're going to double the capacity and make it a, 6240. Obviously, you have another layer of protection in the developer's agreement and conditions that would entail with the city of Halstead. And then the big factor, and again, one of the strengths of a special use permit process in terms of zoning, is other conditions can be applied during that process based on any information that would be obtained from the other studies that were already required in the special use permit process. So those were all things that the Planning Commission put into those draft regulations that they felt were important as far as protections for the city and to properly vet a project. Does having BESS regulations in our zoning code mean a BESS can definitely be built? No. Does having an SUP process for BESS mean that a BESS project is automatically approved? Again, no. Basically, what would be required for a BESS to be developed are those 4 things, and all of those have to be successful. The largest and most in-depth one is obviously going to be that special use permit process. But again, to get an approved SUP, you are not only doing any requirements that would be put in the regulations for an SUP, but it's got to make it through the zoning, and they're going to make a recommendation, and then it comes before you all. And those 2 bodies, as you have seen, can agree and they can disagree. So that is essentially kind of, again, a 30,000 foot view of what regulations and what those draft regulations were trying to encompass for you all.
Some of the other things that I was considering on this project early on when we were looking at it is these new battery units, if you will, in the battery management systems. They utilize an industry standard protocol called Modbus. And that's how I spend my day every week, is doing communications for remote telemetry type operations. And one of the equipment manufacturers that I work with had, I'd asked them about it. And they had basically said they would provide me that equipment free of charge to the city of Halstead, where I could put a unit in our fire station that would be talking to the battery plant via Modbus over a radio connection. And the minute we seen an alarm out there, well, we'd see the same alarm coinciding here in the fire department. That data would also be archived, recorded. We would have an audit trail of what any condition was at any given time in that battery plant. And, you know, if we could move a project like this forward, why, my time spent doing the integration of that particular piece would come to the city at no charge. And that has a pretty high value dollar-wise on that piece of it. So,
Ethan, per your last slide, I personally would like to see us get to that point. Because I really like to see those environmental impact studies. But I also realize we're not gonna pay to have those done. The developer is,
Correct.
and we still say no. But I'd like to be able to get to that point.
I would too.
I don't wanna say no before we get there.
You can't make a decision unless you have information and data in front of you that's pertinent to the project that we're looking at and pertinent to the space that we're looking at. And if any decisions made before them are just emotional and based on fear, I think, in my very humble opinion.
well, like I said, at the end of the day, I can sit there and look at that parcel and tell you that I think it's the perfect application for this technology. But I'm not relying on my opinion to make that decision. We need that engineering report. We need that hazard mitigation analysis. We need somebody that has that degree behind their name, that operates at a little higher level than I normally do to make that decision, or at least to help us make that decision.
To provide recommendations, yes.
I think we need to start, our last meeting got away from us, and I believe our first step would be to review these regulations, and provided we're in agreement on them, would be to pass them and establish our tiers in the ordinances. Because as you said, they don't exist just yet. They don't exist.
Right.
So to ban something that a definition doesn't exist yet,
Correct.
can't do it. So we first have to establish the definition. And if we choose to ban it, we can at least ban within the terms of that definition. So the definition has to be established.
Well, and quite frankly, we owe it to our citizen volunteers
Absolutely.
on that P and Z board that spent the last 18 months developing those regulations
They did
for
a
us to go
fantastic
through
job.
them and accept them.
They did a fantastic job on that. So I
Well,
think,
yeah, I'm with you on that in establishing what all of that and getting an agreement and something actually in policy should be put in place for sure. But also I think, like you said, we owe it to all of our community to have the information that is pertinent to us. You know, I mean, we looked at things in lots of different areas and we've heard stories from lots of different, but I think an environmental study that says how it will impact us is really important because we're the ones that are gonna be impacted by that. And so we can't just take information, and this technology, I mean, is ever changing. And so we need the most up-to-date, most current information that we can get in order to make the best possible decision. And also make a decision that is mindful of our entire community, you know? There are businesses and organizations that use battery energy storage that maybe people don't even realize. And I think that before we make decisions, we're making decisions that are mindful of those types of things as well. Because we don't want to put something into place that's going to have a negative impact on something that already exists. That just wouldn't be responsible governance, really. And so, I do think that having that information would, it's not gonna hurt anything you know what I mean, is the other thing, like you said, we're not out anything, we're just putting ourselves in the best possible, like, educational understanding of the situation, is my, I guess, outlook on that, so.
Yeah, and, you know, going back to my presentation, that project going on right now in Lincoln, Nebraska, when I came across that, I thought that was the most encouraging thing I've seen in several months. That's a zinc-based battery of some type. I need to research it a little more. I haven't done a deep dive into it yet. But the fact that it's non-flammable, non-toxic, and 100% recyclable, that's kind of like the dream team of what we've been looking for this application.
So even if, do we need everyone today to agree that we want to establish the tier or multiple tier? Do we need?
I think that's the direction we need to work on. We need to define those regulations, define those tiers. And you're basically gonna have a residential tier, a commercial tier, and then a large industrial tier.
Yep.
And I think Ethan's kind of got those numbers in mind. For me, like I said in my presentation, I think the base regulations should completely cover residential-based BESS. And then the minute you move to commercial scale or industrial scale, then you automatically move that over to the special use permit application process, because it just has a lot more oversight in how those permits are issued and what requirements that developer would have to meet to get approval. And at this point, to be honest with you, the current developer that we've been engaged with, I don't know if they'd be willing to move right now into a special use permit process with us, or willing to continue to invest until they can get some kind of insurance that if they check all the boxes, they could eventually be permitted to build the plant. And I don't know what that's gonna take. It's gonna take some time to dialogue back and forth with them and see where they're at and see how they wanna go forward.
But at the end of the day, we do need to have something established, whether this company or organization, because anybody at any point could come, and if we don't have something in place, then we're back to where we were to begin with. So, not to disregard what you just, but I still think it's important to have something in place for our own, then it puts us kind of in the driver's seat of what we would or would not be able to accept. Because right now, we have nothing.
Well, one of the discussions, one of the things that I brought up when I brought up my motion a couple weeks ago, I guess it has been, it's been a while since, that I didn't have an ordinance attached to the thing. And that was my mistake for just not getting an opinion when I did it. I, too, believe that we ought to have the regulations and some kind of set deal to define what it is and what it isn't. I don't think it's fair to planning and zoning to go through all that and not use the recommendations and accept them to what we're looking at and what we're not. I visited with Ethan a little bit. I visited with several people on this. I visited with Dennis. I appreciate the passion of everybody that steps foot in here, because they all have their reasons and not. So My, my thinking is I come in here, I'm thinking, well, yeah, we need to set those regulations because, we're here, Shauna said it as a reason, I think I've conveyed that to several of the folks out in the audience. We need to have, it's our job to do this. That's why you ask us to sit here and you ask us to take a stance. And, whether it's me here a year from now or not me a year from now, which it may not be, that's fine. That person's gonna have to take the same stance on what they believe is right and what is wrong based on the info that we got. I too think we ought to have it. This is what, you name it, whatever we want to call it, tier one, this is what the regulations are. This is what kosher for our city without having to have the special use. I think we still need to have it in place. This is what kosher not to have, whether we ever have one or not. I think it's important to do. And our work session tonight is to base what we're gonna base on the language there. I thought, visited about delaying it, maybe putting some kind of time frame on it, a moratorium. I don't know if that has any support here. I would be in favor of that, but maybe you guys aren't. But I'm not sure that this meeting or this time is the place without the thing in place. If the, I know the planning and zoning talked about us, brought up a moratorium. I don't know if that's really their thing to do. Actually, that's more of our thing to do, I believe. If the technology is great, better, or fantastic in 2 or 3 years, then maybe that's a thing. Or maybe if somebody else is making that decision a year from now, they can make another decision. That's my feeling on it. There's all true. We don't get a true segment of everybody. What I have to deal with as a council person, and we all have to deal with, is who we talk to. And who we go up and talk to, and what they represent, and what they want, and what they don't want. That's what we have to go by. True, I'm only getting what if I put out a survey, that's what I'm getting. I'm getting that number of people. I tell you what I didn't get after I brought up the thing. I got some people that said, oh, I'm glad you did that. And I got a few people that said, well, we really support it, and this is the reason why. But I didn't get an overwhelming, yeah, we really want it. I'm not saying it's not good, because I don't know the regulations on it. I just have to believe what I believe. And that's my point in it. I said it when I said it on 2 Mondays ago. I said it because I got to go with what I hear and what people bring to me. Now, in a week from now, when the council meeting comes around and we maybe we make the decision, maybe we don't have nothing to make the decision on yet by the time we get there. If there's 50 people that's watching this or reads a paper or whatever, and they come and say, man, I really want this, or I get 50 more people that says, no, I don't think so. Folks, that's where I'm basing my decision. It may be a great opportunity. We may all get to the special use permit, and we may come in and find out, and we're sitting there, whatever time frame that is, and say, man, I'm glad that it brought all that information to us, but it's not something we really want. Maybe that, that's just me talking. And that, the other thing is, what are we here for? Yeah, we're here to listen to everybody. I agree totally. Maybe it's a good project. The way that it's laid out, it could be. Or it couldn't be. I think I said this to one person, and he knows who it is. I said, I was a little bit discouraged by the fact that we tried our best two Mondays ago. We tried our best, and some people agreed and some people didn't at the time. And I kind of take that with a grain of salt, and I'm not going to walk out mad at anybody because that's not what I do. But when we come into these things and we start talking about it, we also ought to have an opportunity. And I was a little bit not offset that, you know, we're put here to make the decisions. And sometimes I would like the opportunity to make the decision. You know? And anybody that's elected or appointed, you know, it's just like you guys, I'm not saying that anybody was riding our coattails or anything like that, but you got to give us a chance. You know, even if the regulations, we come back and on Monday we adopt, or whenever we adopt the regulations, when we have a chance to do that, to give us a chance. So if I want to say, Ethan, can you draw up an ordinance where we just have tier 1? And that's what we do, that's fine. Or if we say, can we have another couple weeks? I know that patience is something that's not easy to come by, but gosh darn it. Not everything's as easy and as cut as dry as it seems.
No, it's been a difficult project, to say the least, to look at. You know, obviously, the economic development opportunity for Halstead with this project is huge. And
Well,
if,
I'd like to say something, Dennis.
go ahead, George.
You know, Jim put his survey out, and he came up with over 300. What I did, I don't know, many of you probably saw me with my little notebook. I had a little spiral about this big, and I was actually going up into people's yards, going to their houses, and if I was driving by, I saw somebody raking, I would stop and ask them. I'd say, I'm gonna ask you a question. I want yes, no, or I need more information. And then I would ask them the question. And some of them had a really immediate answer. Some of them, I talked about it. And trust me on this, I tried to be as diplomatic as possible and as neutral as possible in representing the information so that I had a real dialogue with people. I didn't want to try to sway anybody. But I had similar numbers to what Jim had. I had, and I got to find my little book. I know it's in one of my vehicles, but I had 143 no's. I had 14 yeses and 12 I need more information. And I know all of these people lived in Halstead because I was in Halstead when I asked these questions. So, and I stopped asking about 2 months ago because I saw the trend, but I'm gonna find my little book and I'm gonna start asking again. But that's where I'm at, so.
Anybody else? Do you have some more things that you want to cover as far as the language for utility commercial scale prohibition, Ethan?
No, I guess from a staff perspective, it's just getting a consensus from you all of, again, what information you want, what direction you want us to provide you the support services in.
Well, I definitely think it's in the council's best interest to review what planning and zoning has submitted. We probably need to define those tiers, like we said originally. And then maybe after we get that part done, decide how we're gonna proceed from there.
I'd like to say before you even said that, my intent is going to be to go through that thumb drive and just read this and read it and read it. And my intent is hopefully we will be in here on Monday to collectively either move forward, take a vote on it, or we have dialogue if there's things that need to be discussed and changed. But at minimum, we need to establish
I want something to, if I'm gonna make a motion sometime, I want something to establish it on.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes from this body that we've got. I mean, a lot of it's based on, should be based on the recommendations. And, but I want it specific, so I don't have the questions that I had the last couple of weeks about. And some of them are pretty basic, you know, but still, I think we need to put them in there and get the regulations out and adopt them, whether we ever use them past the one tier or not. I feel that's important. And I want to hear from folks.
So you think it would be,
I want to hear from them.
I'll say that also. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys see us on here.
I mean,
Reach out to me. You have my Facebook, you have my cell phone. It's, Kevin put it out there.
And if,
Um,
and I encourage
hear.
people on both ends of this dang thing to talk to us. You know, if you want us to make that decision, I'll go to bat. Either way that it comes around, because I feel that's important. That's who we represent. You know? I'm not here for me. I'm content with my little spot on Halstead Road. But I want to hear from the folks. You know, that's who I want to hear from. And, you know, if it's this week and we're going into next week, that's fine. It's out there. My email address is out there. My phone number is out there. And I want to hear it. And I'm just going to say it like it is. I'm going to base it off what I hear.
well,
It's that simple.
so it's pretty safe to say we have a consensus to move forward with looking at the regulations that have been presented.
One thing Jim and I have done, we've talked to each other. We're gonna bounce issues off of each other, language if we don't have an understanding on something. So I don't know, maybe
So,
one of you guys can
yeah,
partner up with somebody.
sure,
No more than two, though.
right.
Yeah,
So I
that's a
guess my
no-go.
question to you is that you're gonna base all of your information off of 8 or 15% of the community that you serve. That's what you're saying?
Well, let me ask you, what do you base it off of?
Well, I think knowledge about the topic
Absolutely.
feels like it would be probably my first thing. And I would say that's where I'm learning as I go.
Sure.
That I did get emotional and I did feel a lot of things in this room, I will say. And I didn't let my like broad scope of the, you know, and that's what I said, you know, earlier, like I'm learning through this process, but you know, I don't know that I can take 10% of people that say, you know, well, I'm not for this because a car caught fire in Florida, you know, or something. Like,
I agree.
I can't let that impact what's happening in Harvey County, Halstead, Kansas, right? Like, that's me though, but that was my question to you. Like, I'm going to have to do my due diligence to be educated on said topic. Like, I will listen to you. I'm gonna listen to you, but I'm gonna also ask that we're having the most
Absolutely.
pertinent, relevant information provided on said topic. I mean, for me. And so, I mean, and you do what you
Oh,
need
I
to
agree.
do.
I mean, we about got to do that. My biggest thing is, you know, if there's massive underlying, just unfiltered support for this, then I want to hear about that too. And I want to see what the regulations are and what it covers and what it doesn't cover.
Well, yeah, how
and
can
all
we
that
say
stuff.
we're for or against something that we know like this much about, right? Like, that's all I guess I'm saying.
Oh, I
Because I
agree.
mean, it's all, yes, I mean, in the last 10 years, I mean, we saw the data, we've seen, and yes, I live in a world of data. Anything that you find something good, you can find probably something bad. I live in that world. That's why having experts speak on said topics, I feel like is gonna be really valuable. But that's just me.
You know, if this were an issue where we do need the wastewater treatment plant, we're gonna be doing that. We've signed contracts. But if half the citizens, or more than half the citizens, said, no, we don't want this. And we as council said, you don't have a choice, we need to shove this down your throat. We need a wastewater facility. I would be one of these guys shoving it down their throat, because we need a wastewater facility. This is not one of those absolutes that we need.
And we don't have 50% saying that, I mean.
You-
that's
That's why
10.
I'm gonna go knocking on doors now. I'm not
Okay.
just gonna.
George.
That's fine, that's all, I guess, that was my, question on that, like, if that's what you're gonna, then I feel like you need a bigger population.
I want
in
more
your-
than 15%. I'm gonna knock on doors. You guys are gonna see me out there.
You say it's not an absolute, George, but you've sit right here through our budgeting meetings and everything else. You realize that our revenue streams to the city have not changed
I understand that we
in
had a
many
discussion
years.
to address
And,
that.
I've been involved in this governing body I was set out for 2 years, but over a span of 13 years. And never once have I sit through a budgeting session where we were looking at cutting stuff so we could make our budget work. This year's the first year we've seen that. This is a significant economic development opportunity. There's no doubt about it. People that want to sit out there and say, I'm only looking at it because of the money, that's not true. I have dived into the safety aspects of it, probably more than anybody else. And I'm telling you, we're not relying on my opinion to make the decision, but I agree with Shauna. We need to see the information from the experts in the industry to see if they can collaborate with the data that I'm finding out there and my personal beliefs, if that's right. People that sit here and tell me that $500,000 is not very much money coming to the city, well, great. Then we would welcome you to write that check and give it to us every year. And if you can't write that check, I can't either, so I'm looking for somebody that can. People have been out there accusing of me of being on the take and getting paid under the table, which is absolutely ridiculous. But if you want to know, am I on the take? Absolutely I am. I'm on the take for the entire city. I want to see us make some money off of this, but not at the expense of being harmful to our community. These things are all across the U.S. I showed you the growth pattern. I showed you the connection requests. This technology is coming to a community near us. So we can embrace the technology, try to regulate it, hopefully make some money off of it if we can get it approved, or we can sit by and watch our neighbors take advantage of it. And by not allowing the developer to go through our process, we are risking any development opportunity in the future. Because with site selectors coming in, they will ignore Halstead based on this project if it's not allowed to at least be seen through the process. Some of the major points in the presentation I gave tonight were items that I'd went over with members of the public. My door has always been open for anybody to come and discuss this project with me. I won't say that I'm the smartest guy in the room on the technology, but I've got a pretty damn good grasp on it. And I'm willing to have that conversation with anybody. So I think those are the things we need to consider.
Ethan, you have a pretty good direction on where we're headed on Monday at this point?
Regulations.
That one I can go for.
You guys have the regulations, I mean, that are on there. I guess that would be the thing is.
I've looked them over. I mean, I would just,
What, we've got
some kind of formal.
2 separate legal reviews with potential changes to those regulations. Have you guys looked over those? That's what I think we need to look at, is that those 2 legal reviews and what their changes look like.
Well, I think Denise and Shauna and myself, we've been trained to make decisions on empirical evidence.
We don't have any.
Not opinion. I'm sorry,
We don't have.
because it's not that decision based on empirical evidence. Not
If
emotional.
you're saying that I don't, you are absolutely and totally incorrect.
I'm not saying you are anything, Jim.
I have worked in the safety business for 40 years.
And so you know.
Do
what-
not look at me and say I don't look things through. I will not stand for that.
I'm sorry if you took it that way.
That's the way I took it, because you just mentioned 3 names, and
Well,
you didn't
no,
look
because-
this
because
way.
we were
This is-
educators. And that's what we do when you get a master's degree or advanced degree.
So my,
You're trained. If you do a thesis,
I'm down with you.
it takes empirical evidence.
Oh, no.
Jim, I think you're well qualified to talk on the subject. And I believe everybody here at this table has an opinion. And I've always felt that the decision this body arrives at as a group is always the best decision for the city. Obviously, this project has some emotion, some contention around it. We've got this direction to proceed with reviewing these regulations. I think that's a great place to start. And so with that, we'll plan on doing that at the next meeting. It's gonna probably take several meetings to get through those regulations. And then we'll just keep working it and see where we end up. We know that the group is pushing for a petition for some citizen-led legislation that basically would institute a 10-year ban on the technology. I will say this, based on the information I'm seeing out there in the industry, if we don't take a look at this for 10 years, the opportunity will be gone. Based on the project in Lincoln, Nebraska, that I've got high hopes for, and that technology and how that new zinc-based battery looks, I would be willing to put a 2-3 year moratorium in place so we can see that technology develop and maybe bring that to the table.
I was very interested in that.
Yeah, once you bring a non-flammable, non-toxic, easily recyclable battery to the table, that's really answers all the problems that we've had surrounding this project. Other than Gary's noise issue, but, you know, we can hold them to special use permit at what level that can be. I think there's some things out there to consider, so I would just encourage the council to hang in there. Keep being passionate, keep doing the job that we were all elected to do. Keep listening to our constituents and keep educating yourselves. So that's about all I've got to say about it, and we'll just hopefully move forward. And did we have anything else that we needed to cover tonight? And council, if anybody else would like to add anything, I would welcome that. If you're done talking for the night, I would entertain a motion for adjournment if that's what you're ready to do.
I would like to say that I would support a moratorium on there, just like you said.
I would say the same to that.
Yeah, that's my undereducated opinion.
That's EOS Z3 technology, I believe is what they call it. So if anybody wants to look that up, I plan on studying it quite a bit in the next few days. I did find that very interesting when I come across it. And there's a lot of us in this room that have done a lot of reading, and we've read about different battery technologies, but you know, the question always comes up, is it commercially available? Well, if they have these units sitting in Lincoln, Nebraska, that tells me it's commercially available. I don't know on what scale yet, so I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. So if we're done, council, I'll take that motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you, council.